My name is Jeremy Koff, Senior Consulting Editor to Neurotech. Also, I do a bunch of other stuff in the neuromodulation world. The title of this session is Neurotech Investment Outlook. Is the gold rush over? What about the silver rush or the bronze rush? I'll take anything right now, I suppose. But we have a distinguished group of panelists. Ariane Tom, she is the Managing Director of Kaleida Capital. We have Suraj Mudachintala, who's a Senior Associate of Action Potential. And then we have Amy Cruz, who is remote. Amy, thank you for joining us remotely. Absolutely. And finally, Nick Langhals, who is the Program Director for Translational Device Programs at the NIH NINDS. So thank you for coming all the way from DC. Really appreciate it. So we're going to start by giving a little bit of an overview of the investment landscape today. And let's go back to actually, let me get the first slide. Here are some of the companies I've worked for, in-house. I've worked for many of Almion companies and then consulted to, I don't know, I'm up to 15 or 20 neuromodulation companies I've touched, many as a consultant and many through Neurotech reports. Jim mentioned his consulting arm. So we have a number of folks working together there. So here are the folks for today's panel. But if you're not familiar with SVP, Silicon Valley Bank, they put out a publication every 6 months, and it is certainly among the best in terms of the investment landscape. And this is what it looked like the first half of the year. And I'm just going to highlight very, very quickly, but more as a reference. So if you're not familiar with it, please go and choose. I got to share the screen, sorry. Oh, sorry.
The Zoom people can't see it. My mistake.
Is everyone familiar with the SVB publications and health care they have? Great. So you probably look at it. And certainly even the first 6 months was a lot rosier than where we are today. I don't really need to go through that, but I do want to share.
Okay, you're good.
So you can download from the link and what is that screen?
Get you back to PowerPoint.
And certainly look at the publication and see where we were for the first half of the year. But what I really want to share before we jump in is Y Combinator. This is, even quite a few months ago in May 2022, sent out an email to all their startup founders, and it wasn't a rosy picture where, this is directly from their email communication. Plan for the worst, cut costs and extend your runway. Top VC funds slow down their deployment of capital. Lesser funds often stop investing or die. This results in lower valuations, lower round sizes, and any fewer deals completed. Future fundraisers will be much more difficult. If you are post-Series A and pre-product market fit, don't expect another round to happen at all until you have obviously hit product market fit. And
Jeremy, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Jeremy, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because I want to just make everyone aware that we have not one but two Y Combinator funding firms who will be presenting here.
Fantastic.
Zato is going to be presenting tomorrow. Their CEO is here, and Ingrid is here from Neurodynamics Technologies. So congratulations to both of those firms. Sorry for the interruption.
No, absolutely. And lastly, your chances, I should say, chances are extremely low, even if your company is doing well in terms of raising money in the next 6 to 12 months. So that was already in May, and things have gone downhill since then. So with that as a backdrop to our discussion, we do have Nick, who's going to come up here and tell us about his programs and his free money that he needs to give away. And where we're headed, not only today, but perhaps next year or the next few years with his programs. Thank you, Nick.
Get you up here in a second, Nick. What did we call your file? It's you know what? Let me just pull it up on PowerPoint. Oh, it's this one. This one? get out of Jeremy. Okay. And we need to go to Nick. And we're gonna play from start. Is that showing up? Swap it. We know how to swap now. Yeah. Is that working? No. Swap again?
That looks good.
Oh, leave it?
Doesn't look good on that one.
That
Choose-
looks good on the-
Choose your poison.
Now it's back to the other mode.
All right. Well, let's leave it on screen because people can watch on that screen or this one. Sorry about that. All right, Nick, go ahead. Just use the arrow keys.
So thanks, everyone. So I'm here representing NIH and NINDS, as Jeremy said, the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. However, I do wear many other hats within NIH. I'm a team lead within the Brain Initiative. For those that aren't aware, the Brain Initiative funds lots of research in the development of new neurotechnologies, as well as using those tools to better map and understand the circuits in the brain. A good milestone that we just crossed the end of our last fiscal year in September, and we've now reached over $3 billion of funds that have been committed to projects as part of the Brain Initiative. So a huge accomplishment there. Within our programs and my teams, we manage a lot of the recording and modulation tool development, both from the early stage and new concepts all the way through the translational pipeline, first in human studies, and our public-private partnership programs. We within my group also manage activities within the HEAL initiative, focused on developing devices to treat pain and address the opioid epidemic. We oversee the NINDS translational devices programs, and in particular, we have our newest program that we've launched that is called our Blueprint MedTech program that I'm here to kind of provide a brief overview of some more kind of good news on top of the others in this space. So the overall goal of this Blueprint MedTech program is that we're trying to set up an NIH incubator to really accelerate more cutting edge medical devices to diagnose and treat disorders of the nervous system, to catalyze these from early stage development to first in human clinical studies, and ultimately to accelerate access to these new and novel technologies. So the program is designed to help provide support in terms of funding, but also in terms of resources from the NIH in order to facilitate this overall translation. The program overall has several participating institutes and centers across NIH, including the one seen on the screen here. This spans several and most of the institutes that have large portfolios in the neurosciences area, but not necessarily all of them. And in particular, some of the more peripheral and autonomic disorder institutes, such as Heart, Lung, and Blood, and NIDDK, the digestive and diabetes and kidney disorders are not included as participating. So the program itself provides non-dilutive funds, so we don't take away your equity. For those that aren't aware, to support development activities that are led by the investigators. But the other novel part of the program is that we're also standing up various different free resources that investigators will be able to take advantage of that include consultants that'll be funded by NIH, CROs, and access and assistance from NIH staff to manage and facilitate those interactions in parts of the projects. So as can be seen here, the goal where we're really trying to facilitate is through what we're calling the development and translation side of the pipeline. We'll provide funding in the types of early stage kind of seedling projects on the order of $50,000 or $100,000 to kind of get things off the ground and provide some of that seed funding. We'll support later stage development projects as well that will facilitate kind of building up and assembling your prototype that's ready for a first in human use. And then through our later stage efforts as part of our translator programs, we'll support the non-clinical testing needed for your IDE and IRB approvals, as well as the first in human study of the novel technologies through two different mechanisms. There's a UG3, UH3 for academic-led type projects, as well as our U44 mechanism for small business-led projects. And then across the bottom here, you can see the various different resources that we're providing to the investigators, either through some virtual incubator hubs that we've just recently stood up. The awards went out the door about a month and a half ago. And those will provide some of the resources, and then others will be provided through standardized contracts at NIH. And in particular, you can see that we're planning to provide assistance with design, prototyping, bench testing, so assistance with business development, as I mentioned, consultants and industry experts that we're bringing on board, regulatory compliance and quality system support, your biocompatibility and animal studies, clinical trial support, including your study monitoring committees, a central IRB service, and additional recruitment and early stage usability testing services. And then we'll have an external oversight committee that provides some additional feedback on the projects as they move along. So you can kind of see that the general criteria. In particular, we are trying to support novel technologies. We intentionally didn't use breakthrough to be synonymous with the FDA and some of the controversy around that. But generally what we're looking at are things that are in that more risky category, the things that likely need pre-market approval or fit into a de novo where there isn't necessarily a predicate. Though we are able to support projects that may be on that 510(k) pathway where there may be additional clinical innovation or exploring potentially new clinical populations, even if there's less innovation on the technology platform. But keeping in mind that with all of the NIH programs, we're really looking at trying to support things that do have a strong scientific basis along with them. So we have a variety of funding opportunities. The one you did just miss that is being managed through the incubator hubs for the development and seedling projects. We funded the two virtual incubator hubs, as I mentioned recently. One is CINTA, managed through CIMMIT and the Mass General Harvard system, and the other Neurotech Harbor is a collaboration between Johns Hopkins University and Howard University, with a specific emphasis on trying to advance and facilitate improving the diversity and supporting underrepresented groups in the neurotech space. And then we have, so there will be another solicitation for those projects in March. For the later stage translator programs, as mentioned there's a due date in February and another in June of next year. And then over the last several months, we have had both the BRAIN Initiative and the HEAL Initiative sign on to this program as well, to support projects that fit within their mission and to be able to take advantage of the large set-asides that are coming from Congress on the order of, $500 to $600 million a year in each one of those programs to potentially support relevant projects in this space. You can find more information on our website or by sending an email. The email mailbox for the program is blueprint-medtech@nih.gov, or see me and I can give you a card. So I would like to thank our overall core team. As I mentioned, there are several, I think we're up to 14 participating institutes and centers, but the program itself is co-led by myself, Leonardo Angelone at NIDA, and Mike Wolfson at NIBIB. And then we have other colleagues that are serving and managing the projects in the hubs, as well as the contracts, including Mariah Bittman, Dan Kostov, Ranga, Jessica Tillman, and Stacy Gutowski. Thank you, everyone.
You need slides or no? No slides for the remainder of this panel. So we're going to have each of the VCs talk a little bit about their funds and perhaps a little bit about themselves, just for a few minutes each, and then we'll go into a discussion in Q&A.
Stop sharing here.
Oh, so Amy, I know you're remote. Can you hear us? And let's see if we can hear you. We'll start with you,
Yeah.
Amy.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Great. So yes,
Amazing.
tell us a little bit about your fund, and we'll just a few minutes, and then we'll go down the line, and then we'll go into a discussion.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me remotely. I appreciate it. We have a partner meeting today, so I had to stay put. So we are Prime Movers Lab, deep tech venture investing firm. We look for breakthrough science that has the potential to impact billions of lives. Take that pretty seriously, and we do that across 6 thematic areas. So manufacturing, transportation, infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and of course, my favorite and most appropriate for this meeting, human augmentation. And within the human augmentation space, we do everything neuroscience, so brain-computer interfaces, neurostimulation, neurodegeneration, mental health, novel therapeutics. And on the other side is diseases of aging, longevity, tissue regeneration, regenerative medicine in general, cell and gene therapy. We work across two spaces. So we work across on the early stage side, seed plus, Series A type investments, typically $2 to $5 million first checks into a priced round with the opportunity to follow on. And then we also have an early growth fund that focuses on B and C investments. We have about $1.3 billion under management right now, and currently allocating out of our early stage fund $250 million. Which is our Fund 3. And then just one more comment, which is not just capital, but those of us who are operators. I'm a neuroscientist myself, as well as a startup founder. We lean in with the companies that we work with, really try to provide support. So in addition to the investing partners, we have talent support, creative design, marketing and branding, executive coaching, all the things that one might need to get off the ground. So thanks for hosting me today and being part of this panel. Look forward to hearing from everybody and a great discussion.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Ariane, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah. Oh, this one's working.
You can just start.
Do you want me to go instead? Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to meet everyone here. So I'm representing Action Potential Venture Capital. We're a single LP fund. Actually, we're a subsidiary of GSK. It's GlaxoSmithKline. The fund was formed about 10 years ago with the kind of intent to use the nervous system and neuromodulation specifically to address some of the molecular limitations of traditional pharmatherapies. And so we've been around for about 10 years. In terms of our focus, it's been strictly on bioelectronic medicines and more broadly as energy as medicine to treat various modalities of disease. We have 10 investments thus far in our portfolio. And in terms of our kind of investment scope, we invest about $5 to $10 million in an initial check. We call ourselves broadly seed to Series A investors, although we've kind of broken that rule many times. So I would say at this point, we're probably more stage agnostic. And then, maybe very quickly on my background, I am a traditional business background. I started my career in management consulting for about 2 years. I worked at LEK, where I predominantly focused on private equity due diligence efforts and commercial strategy work for a variety of life science clients. After which I transitioned to another venture fund based in Ann Arbor, where I invested broadly across healthcare technologies for about 4 years and joined APVC about 5 or 6 months ago. So it's a pleasure to meet everyone here.
Okay, we'll try this again. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariane Tom. I am Managing Director at Kaleida Capital. We're newly formed and have a special interest in investing and supporting early stage companies in precision neurosciences and neurotechnology. A bit about myself. I'm originally trained as a materials engineer at Stanford, where I completed my bachelor's through PhD studies. I contributed to a lot of interdisciplinary research programs, benefiting a lot from the early years of the BRAIN Initiative. And a lot of those novel technologies include new types of electrode interfaces for neural systems, optical and genetic methods of interrogating neural circuitry with applications in brain mapping, neuromodulation, and drug delivery. I became really interested in the translation of this science and the commercialization efforts. And so I actually started my career in patent law and intellectual property prosecution, helping startups in medical devices and life science tools develop their IP strategy. And then ultimately became an investor at Anzu Partners, where I previously worked for close to 3 years, driving the life sciences portfolio there, and serving as a board observer at several companies across immunotherapy, drug discovery, cancer diagnostics, and gene therapy for infectious diseases. And so now returning back to my roots at Kaleida Capital, where actually 5 years ago, in parallel with my graduate studies, I started the firm as a consulting firm to support small life sciences VC funds in the SF Bay Area with their due diligence, and supported a self-curated portfolio of companies at the intersection of engineering and biology. And now I'm working towards establishing an investment thesis that's directly inspired by the neuroengineering research that I started at Stanford. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. So we really have two sets of questions. One set for you, Nick, but feel free to chime in terms of what you've seen on the VC side, and the others for the investors. So we'll start with some of the investors in terms of, I showed that slide from the communication from the Y Combinator in terms of painting a pretty dismal environment from a funding perspective, particularly for seed and Series A. What are you experiencing today out there in terms of the appetite for funding, seed and Series A? And also, where are we with valuations today compared to, 6 months to a year ago? So anyway, feel free to chime in, and as well as Amy, feel free to speak as well.
Yeah, if maybe I'll go first. It might make it a little easier, and then we can chime in. Just in terms of what we're seeing, I've actually seen a pretty robust seed stage deal flow. I really haven't seen that let up at all. I do think valuations have remained pretty reasonable there, and I think people are getting a lot of interest, particularly in the neurotechnology space. Maybe even a wave of things that I've seen at the seed stage lately. Have definitely seen the size of Series A rounds come down. So a lot of people that said they were going to be raising $40 million rounds are now raising $25 to $20 million rounds, and valuations have come down with those as well. But I still think there's pretty good deal flow. The larger the round, the longer it's taking. So whereas maybe a Series A round could have gotten done in 3 months prior, I think 6 months is probably what I'm seeing as an average in those spaces. But thankfully, there's still lots of great deals out there. So hand it over to the rest of the panelists for what they're seeing.
Thanks, Amy. I can chime in next. So I think in general, we've generally seen deal flow remain strong as well, especially in the last few months. We've seen quite a few deals that have been very compelling. I think the reason for that is probably twofold. I think one, the effects of the economy today are probably going to be more impactful on later stage pre-IPO funding rounds. And so you see a lot of the kind of larger, the Tiger Globals, the larger hedge funds, late stage PE firms pulling back a little bit because of the allocation issue that Dr. Jain had mentioned in the previous talk. I think the seed stage and Series A stage deal flow is going to probably lag behind some of those broader trends. And so I think probably in the near term, we're going to continue to see strong deal flow. I think valuations will maybe come down a bit, but I think as you kind of stretch out to the 3 to 5 year mark, where, newer VCs and kind of VC funding in general starts to get depressed due to, all the other macroeconomic factors, I think that's when you'll start to see a little bit more, a little bit less investment in the earlier stage companies as well. So I think it's just a lagging effect. But that's I totally agree with Amy's comments as well in terms of what we've been seeing in the last 3 to 6 months.
Thank you. I'll just piggyback on what the other panelists have spoken to, but also add that generally, what happens when there is a market downturn or some events such as what we had seen during COVID, a lot of these established venture funds, they want to be able to conserve a lot of their resources to support there are currently existing portfolio companies. And so that's probably a contributing factor to why there is also in the last 3 to 6 months, a slowdown in the number of new deals that have been happening. Is just, alluding to what Jeremy brought up earlier in his intro, the slowing down of deployment, it makes sense at this time. But I do anticipate that probably later in 2023, as things start to shift, perhaps we'll be able to see more of those funds making initial investments again.
Just because it's related, Nick, in terms of the availability of funding from your programs, certainly that seems to be isolated or insulated from the economy. But speak about that and any changes that you're seeing potentially for 2023 and 2024 from your programs.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Yes, maybe. So I would say overall, the funding levels have been good and generally increasing. For the most part, we've had pretty substantial bipartisan support of NIH and a lot of our programs over the last several years. So I think that is definitely a positive sign looking forward. The specifics of exactly how much money we're going to have at any given point in time is entirely up to Congress deciding on a budget, which as of right now, we still don't have one for this fiscal year that we entered last month. So still kind of operating under the continuing resolution in government speak, meaning that the budget levels are generally flat until they decide on a budget. Having said that, the one thing, at least in a lot of our programs that we've noticed in the pandemic, particularly in our small business programs, that the volume of applications has gone up substantially. And so, if money basically stays flat or increases slightly, similarly, that means success rates for some of the opportunities and programs and what's going on. But having said that, a lot of our special initiatives, the brain initiative and the fuel initiative set aside funds, that there's more opportunity for us to select projects through those initiatives. And those have, there's still plenty of opportunity there.
Great, thank you. And I had meant to do this earlier when I just started, just so we know who's in the audience for each other as well. Raise your hand if you are a startup founder or CEO. Okay, we have, lots. All right. And raise your hand if you're seeking seed capital, Series A, beyond Series A. All right, and what about institutional investors in the house? Okay, and what about qualified individual investors? Jim, next time we need more of those. All right. Perfect. And what about from industry? Great. All right. So thank you. That just gives us a better idea of who's in the audience. And Nick, this is also for you from your perspective, but we'll start with the VC individuals first. Can you speak a little bit about the due diligence process when you're looking at it, mainly seed or Series A, as well as how long that process takes typically? So let's just talk about that. Amy, why don't you go?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sorry, I get go first, but it's maybe easier. So for us, obviously we're a deep tech venture fund, and so we don't shy away from all types of diligence, whether that's technical diligence or financial diligence. For us, that typically involves obviously myself, and I have a colleague, Justin Briggs, who works with me on the bio side. We're typically the deal leads and really take on any diligence that would need to be done with the company. Certainly if something's, a little bit orthogonal, we'll call in some of our advisors. I would say in general, once we start doing our deep dive or diligence process, takes about a month. We can certainly do it faster. I've done one in 2 weeks, which nearly broke me, but a month is about average for us. And then of course, circling back with with our leadership team and our other partners typically involves, last thing is a presentation to the entire partnership and things like that, but that takes about a month.
Great. And Suraj, but sorry, I know you can only speak to perhaps your previous experience because you have a new fund, but anything you can share that's relevant for the new fund, otherwise just refer to your prior experience. So,
Sorry, we're sharing the microphone because unfortunately this one's broken, but yeah, so a lot of the investments that really get me excited really stem from the scientific perspective. And as someone who's leading the diligence process on a number of opportunities, really what I strive to do is to be able to enhance knowledge of the investor community in terms of what is possible, what is at the cutting edge, and what is commercially viable within a reasonable time frame and can be reached efficiently and effectively with the capital that's being raised. And thinking very practically about that, but also connecting that to the core enabling technology of each company is something that I like to dive into pretty much immediately upon meeting founders and being able to speak honestly with them about what's on their mind in terms of their development roadmap and how they're thinking about bringing that together. I think that all comes into play. To answer the question of what is a due diligence process like, I mean, I follow a pretty standard process as if we would be substantial lead investors really wanting to take the responsibility for driving very strong conviction and really looking thoroughly at every piece. And so, there's an initial deck review, there's follow-up meetings, we do reference calls with folks who they may be collaborating with on clinical studies. We also talk to KOLs within our network to evaluate value proposition, size of the problem and the solution, and the impact. And then we evaluate how our firm or how I myself am able to bring value to those founders and their teams. And at the early stages, there is a lot of things to do to be able to support these founders at the beginning of their journey, whether it be a spin out from university or if they've come across some really interesting intellectual property, helping to transition that out is something I see myself playing a very important role in doing.
great, thank you.
Yeah, I think so. The way that I approach diligence is typically by first taking a look at the basic fundamentals of the deal, right? So how much capital has already gone into a company and working backwards from what's the likely exit size if the product were to successfully be, achieve all of its milestones. And so based on those two factors, we could quickly figure out based on the cap table, well, is this going to be, does this have the potential to be a lucrative deal? And that could be done within a conversation, right? So that's always step one for me. I think step two then is going to trying to understand, well, what are the milestones ahead in this specific fundraise? Typically at the seed or series A level, it'll be early product development. Oftentimes ideally we look for some sort of clinical data, whether it's first in human or at least in vivo model. And then at that point, try and understand, well, does the product sufficiently fit within the market of therapeutics? Will this device and will this company be able to own the condition in which that they're operating in? And ultimately, is there a reasonable pathway to not only achieve FDA approval, but also reimbursement and some of the commercial milestones, which often pose the greatest challenges, especially in healthcare, which unfortunately, as many of you probably know, innovation is not always rewarded based on the strict coding and reimbursement, et cetera. So all of that takes into, I would say that business case process beyond the cap table and financials, I would say is the bulk of the work. And that would take maybe 2 months, I would say most times. That would then lead to a term sheet. And I think for any time that I've presented a term sheet, it's with the intent of closing the deal. So post term sheet, you're looking at kind of the typical corporate diligence, legal diligence. Sometimes it might be bringing in a consultant to better understand some of the, complex reimbursement dynamics, depending on kind of the condition and the device. And then at that point, it's a process of drafting the documents and then pulling together a syndicate. So if we're leading the deal, we also have to kind of coordinate within our networks to reach out to our other investors that may be interested, or if the management team has some other investors around the table that, so those negotiations have to go on as well. And so I think end to end, that entire process typically takes about 2 to 3 months.
And Nick, in terms of, beyond the application, which I know can be very time consuming, I've heard, folks that have applied for several programs, 100 hours or so, that's if you know what you're doing. But beyond the application, what do you require from your programs?
Yeah, so
I think I have to use that.
okay, there we go. So yes, beyond the application, NIH has a fairly standardized kind of peer review process. From the time you submit the application until they're reviewed is on the order of 3 or 4 months. So there's a waiting period at that point. After the applications are reviewed, you get an overall priority score that kind of indicates how well overall or how highly impactful the reviewers thought the proposal was. You get your summary statement typically about a month after that. And then at that point, we go through our internal due diligence process for kind of developing and making our funding plans, which includes, asking the investigators for a response to any of the weaknesses or critiques that were brought up by the reviewers on the summary statement. Sometimes asking for additional details on your other financial support, financial picture. In some ways, we try to prioritize kind of, as mentioned with a lot of our programs, kind of novel, new and innovative ideas. New companies are prioritized in a lot of our programs, as opposed to kind of repeat investigators that are coming back, but there isn't necessarily a hard line one way or the other. And then we do tend to prioritize our activities in our translational programs that are typically cooperative agreements with milestones and deliverables, so that we have ways to kind of mitigate some of the potential cost that is fed into the program. All that said, with a lot of the programs that I've highlighted, it is not unusual for a lot of these projects to be in the, $4 to $10 million range for kind of an award. So we can definitely get up there. For the Blueprint MedTech program, so the timeline on that, you're probably looking at, about 8 months from submission to a decision, and then maybe some of that due diligence milestone negotiation process. For the seedling and development projects that I had mentioned as part of the Blueprint MedTech program, we are trying something new with that and moving a lot of that review process outside of NIH and letting the hubs manage that. It is a bit of an experiment, but we ran a pilot last year and it seemed to run okay. Still some hurdles there, but as part of that, then for those projects, the hubs are soliciting pre-applications first. Those were due about a week and a half ago or so, I think at this point. Then those pre-application review process takes about 2 to 3 weeks, at which point investigators may be invited for a full proposal. They have about a month to prepare the full proposal. Then from the full proposals, we have a second viability review with them. And then a subset of those proposals may be kind of redirected to the seedling program for kind of a small amount of funding to get things off the ground. And then the other subset go through a deep dive review process that we're referring it to, which is an interactive review between a program facilitator working with the hub and the applicants to kind of start to go through and make it more of an interactive digging into the details, which is not very typical for NIH programs to kind of that level of back and forth. So we're hoping to sort of speed up that overall timeline to about 4 months from initial pre-proposal and until potential award, but we'll see how that goes with our first cycle that we just started.
Great. Well, thank you. We're going to now shift gears, and are there questions either for those that are online or in the audience for our panel members? Well, what do you think of questions? Dr. John, do you have any comments you wanted to share to anything that's been discussed from your perspective, just to contribute on the VC side?
No, I don't have anything else to add. I think one thing I do know in MedTech, valuations generally have never spiked. So we don't see much downward pressure on valuations because they never have been rich. So
Great.
that would be the only thing.
Any questions online, Ladin? Jim, do you want to throw a few questions? I keep rolling. We have maybe 2 minutes,
I'm good.
or we can catch up on time. Any parting comments from each of you, because we're really out of time.
I just, this is Amy. I just wanted to add one more thing on the diligence piece, which I forgot to mention, which was, I think we talked a lot about the deal and we talked a lot about technical elements, but I think all of us, especially look at the founder, the quality of the founder, and certainly we at Prime Movers Lab dig into the psychology of our founders, and that's definitely a part of our, process. And so I think, when we think about these in terms of the team, the deal, the business, and the technology, obviously they're all taken in hand, but certainly, founder is definitely one of the things I forgot to mention and just wanted to emphasize that we dig into.
So to that point, and maybe we'll ask the VCs. I remember being at a panel of investors and asked, well, typically, how long do you know a CE before you make an investment? In that particular fund, and I don't know, I forget which it was, said about 2 years, which means, for those folks in the audience, at least from that fund, start now, right? But how, can you answer that in terms of how long do you typically know the founder or CEO? And, there was a previous comment where, it's almost so hard to, what Dr. John made in terms of cold calling, and you need a warm introduction. But how long do you typically know a founder CEO?
Yeah, so I don't want to put a specific time on it, but I would say I agree with the general sentiment that it's over a long period of time, right? And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one, probably the most important reason is when we first meet someone that we don't really know, it's kind of, getting into bed with them for business is kind of like dating or getting into a marriage without really knowing someone very well, right? So it's a little bit of how do you better understand the person that you're partnering with, and how do you understand whether or not they're able to execute on a plan effectively? And I think while, of course, if there's a deal that's extremely compelling, we'll go in, but I think it's often helpful to kind of see some of that execution risk taken off the table by understanding how effective is this person at pulling together a team and doing what they say they're going to do according to their plan, over a period of 2 to 3 years. And so I think that's why you get a lot of that response of, well, we've known this person for 3 or 4 years. We know that they've built a great team. They've been able to do X, Y, and Z. And so now we're interested. And so that's kind of why that's the case.
And as for myself, I actually have a differing approach. I don't have a specific timeline. I mean, would actually love, there's a lot of you in this audience that I personally have not met yet. And I'm really looking forward to connecting with each of you to learn more about what you're working on. I think it's really important to be able to really understand what's happening in this space. As we all know, there's so much excitement happening in neuroengineering and neurotechnology. New minds are coming together. It's an extremely collaborative environment. And so that's something that I definitely want to be able to foster and bring to the table. Now, that doesn't mean that a lot of the deal flow that I have actually comes from my 10 years in academia and being able to connect with a lot of scientific co-founders who were professors, who were postdocs, who were grad students working alongside me years ago. They may be starting something, and that does create a foundation of mutual connection and experience. But at the same time, I also recognize, I'm a new face, returning back to neurotech as an investor. And, I would love to be able to meet people and feel that energy and that spark and that excitement of something new and really amazing to work together on.
in terms of the government process, so, 8 to 10 months for your grant application to get a decision sounds better than 2 to 4 years. So you just have to put things into perspective when you're complaining about grant timelines. But and on the closing thought on that, same thing, getting to know us helps. If you have your idea, navigating the government process is very complicated to know whether or not you fit within any program or not. So, feel free to put together your 1-page NIH Speak specific aims page, but an executive summary abstract that outlines your tech and your stage of development and indication that you're going after, and we can help to kind of point you in the right direction. I tend to not answer my phone. The email is a much better option.
We're out of time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.